He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Remember this?
We put together a campaign which could reasonably be described as alarmingly aggressive. We put up ads in New Zealand, Paris, Mumbai, Tokyo and London. We flew a banner
With the backing of US-based TV host John Oliver, the pūteketeke, the Australasian crested grebe, crushed all competitors to be crowned New Zealand's Bird of the Century in 2023.
And the winner by a landslide, the pūteketeke.
But when the billboard on the Champs-Elysees got swapped out, when the clips of John Oliver dressed in a grebe costume dropped off the YouTube algorithm, when the fame faded, who was still looking out for the pūteketeke? Kia ora, nau mai haere mai ki te ao hurahanga. Hello and welcome to Our Changing World. Ko Claire Concannon tēnei. Today we're visiting two lakes in the Central Otago region where grebes can be found. Two lakes and two people dedicated to the grebes. First up is Richard Bowman, who I catch up with on the shores of Lake Hayes under the canopy of a big willow tree. We're about to head out on Richard's monthly trip on the lake to count the grebes.
The grebe are wonderful birds to watch because you watch them through all the seasons, through their breeding period, and you see the little ones coming out on the lake, which are really neat to see. And then the population sort of peaks around about February, March, when you've got both young and adults. And then the numbers slowly decrease down into the winter, down to just a few birds left on the lake. We don't know where they go. We assume they go somewhere else. And then in the sort of springtime, they come back. So we're going to look at the birds now, just coming up to, they'll be in the sort of courting, mating phase, and we might even see some making nests. So the idea is by counting the grebe, you get an idea of the total population. You get an idea of the number of young ones that get hatched and fledged during the year. And then we watch those numbers go up and down by the seasons. So that's our routine.
Yeah, so it's mid-October now. It's a beautiful spring morning.
It is. Yeah.
It was very cold this morning, but the sun is there. There's not a cloud in the sky, and it's lovely and still.
It's beautiful. This is ideal conditions to count the birds because you can see them very easily on the lake, and you don't have any distraction with wind or waves.
And you were saying we expect that these will be the birds returning. So do you think it'll be like single birds or pairs of birds? What do you expect to see?
Well, we'll certainly see mostly, I think, paired birds because they generally tend to pair up. I'm not sure if it's for life, but any time around the breeding season, in fact, pretty much all year round, you'll almost always see pairs, but occasionally you'll see a single. The trouble is that they dive a lot. So you think it might be a single, then you look out 50 metres away and another head pops up. So they're quite tricky birds. They spend a lot of time underwater. Interestingly, they don't spend any time on land. They've got very poorly developed legs. Brilliant swimmers and divers, but I haven't actually seen one on land, but apparently they can hardly walk. So their entire life is spent on the water, and they build nests very close to the water, but they can fly. But again, it's very rare to see them flying. It's said that they fly at night, and they must because they go somewhere else and then they come back. But it's very rare to see a grebe flying. I think I've only seen them doing short flaps over the water. But they must come and go, obviously, but we just don't see them when they fly.
Right, and so you do this once a month throughout the year?
I do, yeah. I try to do about the middle of the month and pick a nice morning and I hop in the boat and I go around the lake. It takes me an hour or two. I also check some traps around the lake as well. And there's about 40 or 50 traps around the lake, and I do several traps that are only accessible by boat. By having that ring of traps around the lake every 200 metres or so on the walking track, we hopefully are going to take out the predators like stoats, ferrets, rats, even feral cats, and also there are possum traps as well. So we think it will be helping the bird population because over the last 4 or 5 years, the number of catches of serious predators like stoats and ferrets has gone right down. So even though they're very clever birds, they have this amazing survival mechanism where they'll build their nests over water or very close to water. So the moment they hear danger, they leap into the water. any time of the day or night. And as soon as their chicks are born, basically they follow them. So they are pretty good at looking after themselves, but I'm sure from time to time some of them will get caught by predators if there's predators about.
So that's the work for this morning. Count birds, check traps. The little tinny is up on the sandy edge of the lake, tied to a nearby willow. They're quite dense along this stretch. Richard has provided a life jacket and a small cushion for me to sit on. After I clamber in and he pushes us off, he then has to carefully row the boat to manoeuvre through the branches. We emerge to a view of the flat, calm lake, and he preps the vital equipment. A pair of binoculars, a clipboard, and a pencil. Very high-tech.
Very high.
So we've headed out on the boat. We're just sitting on Lake Hayes in this beautiful, calm morning. Can you tell me a little bit about the lake?
Well, it's a smallish lake. It's not particularly deep. I think it's maximum about 30 metres deep. It's about 250 hectares in area. It's about 1 kilometre across and about 2 kilometres long. What's happened in the last 20 odd years is the lake has suffered quite badly from algae blooms, and this is driven by nutrients coming out of the catchment. Quite a big catchment, about 4,500 hectares. It drains the slopes of Coronet Peak to the north, and the water comes into the lake. It's picking up nitrates and phosphate in particular, and they fertilise the naturally occurring algae in the lake to the point where they produce excessive blooms. And that changes the whole behaviour of the lake. So it used to be a very famous trout fishery once. It still has trout in it, but you don't see anything like the numbers that we used to. And that's because the behaviour of the lake has changed. And now we get, during the summers, we get what's called stratification. You get a very warm, oxygenated top layer of about 5 to 8 metres, which gets too hot for trout, gets up to about 20 degrees. So the trout go down to escape the heat. But when they get down there, the algae that die in that surface, they filter down and they decompose. They take all the oxygen out of the water, which makes it pretty bad for fish.
So the lake is quite modified. Sedimentation, addition of nutrients, and introduced species. The trout, but also perch, which Richard thinks might actually be an important food source for the grebes. He reckons the birds snack on the perch smelt, or babies, when they hatch around December. The other introduced species that's quite obvious on this lake, and that the pūteketeke are also making use of, is the willow.
The overhanging willow provides nesting places for grebe. There's other places too. They'll nest on the banks. I think they nest in the raupo. But I've seen a number of nests in these overhanging branches. So what the birds do, they start bringing bits of stick and nesting material, and they stack it up on an overhanging branch and build themselves a little platform immediately above the water. And because there's heaps of them, heaps of those sites around the lake, and I think the highest count I got was a couple of years ago, in about February, March. We got 251 birds total. That's both adults and juveniles. So that's a pretty high population for a lake this size. Oh, the other thing is it's a very sheltered lake. It can get quite breezy, but you don't get those big waves washing into their nesting sites. But the other very good thing about the lake, it was designated a wildlife refuge back in the 1950s. And as a result of that, they have restricted speeds on the lake. So if you've got a boat, a motorised boat, you can't do more than 5 knots.
Do we have any idea how long they've been here?
Yeah, when I was a youngster here in the 60s and probably the 70s, you never saw grebe. They just didn't come here. I think it was about the early 90s that the first grebe started to turn up here. And it was, the ornithologists got really quite excited about it. And there was a fellow called George Chance from Dunedin who used to come out and count them in a little electric dinghy. I didn't pay too much attention till one day I remember going around the lake, this must be in the early 90s or mid-90s, and I counted 40 pairs of birds, and I thought, this is amazing. So they've come to Lake Hayes probably because they've built up numbers, they've found good habitat here, and they like to come here and breed.
So do you have a general plan that you follow? Do you always go clockwise or anti-clockwise?
I always go around this way that we're going now, which is clockwise. So we can start the motor and we'll just putter along, and I just count every bird I see. It's not overly scientific. I could be missing them hiding under the willows, but because I do the same thing every time, at least it's consistent.
Thus begins the game of Spot the Grebe. I keep pointing out shags at the start, and even a few ducks. And every now and again we stop to pull out the binoculars and have a better look.
Got two pairs there, which is great.
I think I'm starting to get my eye in.
Oh, you will be. You will
It's
be.
the shape of the face of the little puffy bit.
Yeah.
But also their necks kind of move quite distinctively when they're swimming compared to the ducks.
Yeah, quite right. Yeah, longer necks, quite a long pointed sort of a beak, and yeah, they've got a funny way of swimming.
Oh, those two are doing the love heart, kind of chest to chest, head shaking.
Oh yeah, they are too.
Grebes flirt by lifting themselves out of the water, almost chest to chest and beak to beak, shaking their heads and sometimes offering their partners some lakeweed.
Now we did count that pair, didn't we?
Yes. Yeah.
It can get quite confusing at times.
Well, I'm sure, yeah, because they're moving around the lake and they're diving under and... At the southwest end of the lake, there's a Raupo wetland area where the water flows out through Hayes Creek. This becomes Grebe Central during the breeding season.
It can get quite hectic counting birds along here in early summer. Very hard to keep up with them.
And we're focused on the grebe this morning, but there are a number of different birds on the lake.
Yep.
I mean, a lot of ducks, but a couple of different species.
Oh, several different species of ducks. There's teal, I think, grey teal. There's shovelers, there's mallards, there's greys, there's coots and scaup. So those are the common ones I can think of. And we've got a harrier hawk coming over top of us, obviously looking out for something tasty.
Yeah.
On a prowl.
Doing a bit of a cruise by,
Yeah, skimming around the tops, just along the edge of the willows there.
It's quite relaxing, drifting on this small, calm lake, just watching birds. Importantly, the water level doesn't change much throughout the year. At the northern end is another wetland area where Mill Creek flows in, and there's some willow removal and native planting going on there, right beside the lake. But as Richard said, many of the lake's issues are a result of changes further up the valley.
We started a group about 15 years ago called Friends of Lake Hayes, and that group's been working continuously since then in various ways. Initially we started looking at the lake itself to see what we could do in it, and there were expensive and probably not very enduring solutions in terms of trying to manipulate the lake. But what we've done most recently, the last 5 or 6 years, we've focused on the catchment, trying to reduce the amount of sediment coming into the lake from the catchment, and we think we're starting to have some success with that. We've had a big campaign up there during the Jobs for Nature period in 2020. A group called Manatahuna started as a community group, iwi community group, and they got grants of about $3.5–4 million to do catchment restoration work, and that's, we think, is starting to make a difference to the lake. But we can only really just follow progress as it happens. But we know for a fact that the amount of sediment coming down the creek has reduced considerably since the work's been done in the creek. We hope that if we can reduce the amount of phosphorus coming into the lake, it'll eventually settle back down to a more stable, clean state. And that's the best thing we've got going for us at present.
Yeah, that you won't have those algal blooms that are taking all the oxygen.
Yeah, trying to reduce the amount of algal blooms because they really have changed the whole state of the lake.
And that work in the catchment is things like fencing off around the creek and riparian planting, that kind of stuff?
Exactly. There's been thousands and tens of thousands of plants, but also they've put in sediment traps, so small impoundments in the creek which collect the silt as it's coming down during floods and freshers. We've actually got, our chairman Mike Hampf has got a number of recorders in the lake, in the creek, along with the Otago Regional Council. We could fairly accurately measure in real time what's coming down the creek. So they've got recorders that can tell you the amount of turbidity in the water, and that can be related to phosphorus it's carrying, being calibrated. So if you monitor the creek through the recording equipment, which is running 24/7, you can actually get a pretty good idea of what's coming into the lake. And generally speaking, it only comes in during rainy periods and floods and so on. Out there you can see, where is it? In the distance, we'll go a bit close to it later, there's actually a permanent lake monitoring buoy there, and that continuously records the state of the lake from surface to the bottom. Every 6 hours, I think, it takes a series of measurements from surface every metre right down to the bottom of the lake and up again. That information is then sent off via radio signals, and eventually it gets onto the internet. And so we've got Otago Regional Council has installed that, and we're sort of monitoring the actual state of the lake we can monitor it the whole time. Well, now we're drifting into the willows, so I think it's probably time we retreat it.
Get the oars out, fend off from the willows. We complete our lap, counting as we go, and then pull back into the little willow fringe bay where the boat is stored. Our count is in the 20s. It's early in the grebe season, so these numbers will rise in the coming months. Richard began counting in 2019, taking over an existing survey, and the numbers of birds steadily rose each year until a peak in early 2023, when it hit that combined chick and adult total of 251 birds. In 2024, the peak was 177, this year 175. In general, the grebes do well here. Richard acts as a hands-off observer, just keeping an eye on the birds, checking the traps, and making sure there's nothing drastic happening in the numbers. But elsewhere, the grebes need a bit more help.
At the moment, I'm preparing the platforms for the season. So over winter, we get most of the platforms out to give them a break, to dry them out, to maintain them, to check if everything works, that the poo noodles are not disintegrating. And then around this time, springtime, we put them out on the lake again.
This is Markus Hermanns. I'm catching up with him on a small patch of grass beside the Wānaka marina. Road on one side, lake on the other, and some digging works behind us.
And during the breeding season, there's a lot of work. I think primarily check that they are not nesting on the marina and the boats, so that everyone is safe. But also check each individual platform, because the grebes unfortunately do not always build their nest in the center of the platform, which makes the platform tilt, and eventually the platform tips from the wind or from the waves. So I have to often interfere with the birds and readjusting their nests.
Markus is with the Lake Wānaka Grebe Project. He's taken over the work from John Darby, the original Wānaka grebe advocate, and the designer of the first of these floating nest boxes.
John Darby, when he discovered the first pair of grebes, I think it was 12-13 in the breeding season, he observed them and noticed that they had multiple failed breeding attempts. They weren't able to breed here successfully. So he tried to get to the bottom of it and found out that it's due to the changing water level in Lake Wānaka. And the grebes, they can't walk properly on land. So that means if they start building a nest on the shoreline and the water level drops, they can't reach the nest anymore when it sits on the dry. And the opposite, when the water level rises due to rainfall or snow melt, the nest will float away. So I think the natural habitat where grebes are supposed to breed is on lakes that have a really nice natural shoreline, but the water level is relatively constant, like on Lake Hayes, for example, or Lake Alexandrina in Tekapo, which are very popular grebe breeding grounds. Whereas here, like I said, the water level is rising and falling. So John came up with the idea of helping them out by building them these nesting platforms. And they are floating on the lake and are attached to the Wānaka Marina, thanks to the Wānaka Marina board that allowed us to do that. And that helps the grebes to successfully nest here. And I think over the last 10 years, there are over 500 grebes successfully raised here on Lake Wānaka with the help of these platforms.
The platforms are wooden squares, with pool noodles on the bottom to help them float. They have 2 walls to act as protection, some green mesh on the top for the nest, a cross of looped wire to dissuade blackback gulls from nabbing chicks, And each has a number, so the public can see what's going on via the team's Facebook page.
Which birds are incubating, where we expect chicks and when there are chicks and so on. So that's why the numbers are on there. And most platforms are anchored to the bottom of the lake. So we have anchors connected with ropes. So they are floating, although we have up to 5-6 platforms also attached to the marina, which are the preferred platforms for some reason for the grebes. They usually nest first on the marina platforms. Maybe it's more sheltered, or the platforms do not wobble as much.
It's why the nest boxes are here, because of the shelter the marina provides. Elsewhere in the lake, the wind would be too strong for the platforms to withstand. It's also next to a shoreline boardwalk that opened 4 years ago, which runs along the edge of the lake opposite the marina, giving walkers a perfect view of the grebe nest boxes. Markus says he hasn't noticed a big surge in visitors since the grebe became Bird of the Century. But the publicity did help a little with fundraising. They got money from the publisher of a book on grebes, which allowed them to upgrade the platforms. And the locals definitely paid attention.
There were a lot of people who were quite proud of having the grebes here, and they got quite protective of them as well, so that even not everyone knows me here, so even I got yelled at, "Hey, stay away from the platforms," and I said, okay, I have to explain, that's okay. So people really loved having the grebes here and enjoyed all the publicity. 2 books, children books, got published, and after that award as well. They are making the round in the local schools, which is lovely. Yeah, a lot of families come down and parents tell the kids. We have just put up new information boards with up-to-date information about the grebes and the John Oliver hype around the grebes. I think they are an established part of the community, and Wānaka is so famous for it because I think John was the pioneer.
John Darby, he means, not John Oliver. And while there's a lot of love in Wānaka for the grebes, there have also been some conflicts. The platforms are tricky for boat users to maneuver around, especially when the lake is low. And sometimes the grebes decide a boat would do just fine for a nest.
That's one of my tasks, definitely during the breeding season, to keep the birds away from the boats. So we have to remove regularly nests from boats. A lot of the people who have boats here are happy with the grebes being there. Some still need to get used to it.
Each year, Markus, along with his team of volunteer school children, put out about 20 nesting platforms for the grebes. And they're hot property when things get going.
Most of the pairs, they nest twice, or they can nest twice, or even 3 times a season. So they come here, mate, lay their eggs, incubate, they hatch the chicks, then they leave with the chicks. And then when the chicks are old enough, after a few weeks, they come back and have a second clutch or even a third clutch, especially at high time of the breeding season, December, January, February. There is a huge pressure. So the birds, as soon as they have hatched their chicks, they leave, or they get almost pushed out by the next pair, and they immediately lay new eggs. And so, we have to be quite flexible.
Grebes do this thing where, after the eggs hatch, the tiny chicks scramble onto their parents' backs to be cared for. There's no looking after chicks in the nest, so it can be quite a quick turnover. So the nest boxes are full, but there's not really anywhere else suitable to expand to, and the grebes are only here because of the artificial nesting conditions. It sets up a bit of a dilemma.
Yeah, we run out of space, and if we encourage more and more grebes to come here, it's a never-ending story, basically. And so we would prefer if they find a habitat that's more suitable.
Which begs the question of, well, why start this in the first place? That's an easy answer for Markus. Necessity.
We were down to around 1,000 birds in New Zealand, so they were almost extinct. And this project here increased the population slightly. The future of the grebes, I think it will be very, very hard for the grebes to sustain a healthy population if the water quality of New Zealand waterways keeps degrading. Because the dirtier the water, the less food the grebes find, and that's why they are moving. So we think that the grebes used to be on the North Island as well, but for some reason they have left, and we think one of the reasons might have been the food. And then they kept moving south, and now they're only around here, the Mackenzie Basin, Canterbury, West Coast, Southland. but the further north you go, the less grebes you will find. So habitat loss, of course, the loss of wetlands or natural lake shores. So yeah, the future would be good for the grebes if the waterways get cleaner.
So, it comes back to good water quality and catchment scale habitat restoration. The big freshwater issues that the community of Lake Hayes is working on and others across New Zealand are trying to get a grip on too.
Until then, yeah, the breeding platforms are an artificial alternative for them to breed, but it's also a way to keep the population alive or keep the bird alive here in New Zealand. The project, especially due to the publicity, it spreads out a little bit. Very successfully tried in Glenorchy. So they raised a few chicks last year, and now on Lake Dunstan as well, in Cromwell. But yeah, what we always tell them, and we really appreciate that there are people out there who are so keen to help the grebes on their local waterways. However, we always make them aware it is an artificial way, and the best way is if they breed naturally on the shoreline, which, yeah, is tricky.
Thanks to Markus, Hermanns and Richard Bowman. This episode was produced by me, Claire Concannon, and sound engineering was by Phil Bench. Production help on this one was from Kate Newton. If you have any feedback or questions, you can email ourchangingworld@rnz.co.nz. Tēnā koe I whakarongo mai. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Claire Concannon. Kia pai, te wiki.